Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for another climate literacy professional development. And we've got a very, very special one for you all today. And again, the Broad has been amazing working with LAUSD to, provide curriculum to actually, again, this is something that's very unique because I haven't seen too many other museums do this, but again, they are actually developing significant curriculum that goes along with their exhibit that's coming up, I believe in November. I'm sure you'll hear more about that soon. But again, so the idea of having curriculum specifically for that exhibit, I think is going to be really interesting. And I hope more museums, take on that challenge because, how amazing would it be for our students to be able to, even if they can't directly experience the exhibit, that they're able to, learn from it, right? And museum exhibits, usually don't last forever. They're not there forever. And so then, therefore, this will continue to live on in our LAUSD Climate Literacy Schoology group. And again, everybody will get to benefit from it for years to come. So once again, this curriculum, everything the Broad has shared with us, lives in a folder within the Schoology group. Okay. So thank you again for joining us. And then the recording of this video will also be shared in the folder as well. So just give it some time and you'll see that recording. And you can, if other teachers at your school were not able to attend, you can share all that information with them. All right, I am going to hand it off to the Broad team. And again, just really thank you so much again. This has been an exciting endeavor. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jerry. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our walkthrough for the Social Forest Oaks of Tovaangar curriculum. My name is Damaris. I'm the program manager at the Broad, and I'll kind of be speaking a little bit about our overarching project as well as our school visit opportunities as well. So in today's session, we're going to kind of explore how this curriculum was developed and also kind of walk through how to incorporate it into your classrooms. Let me move to the next slide. I'll kind of introduce our larger project of the same name, Social Forest Oaks of Tovaangar, as well as some of the amazing team behind this curriculum. We're also thrilled to have our Tongva collaborators, Lázaro Visu Jr. and Desiree Martinez, with us here to present some important themes and concepts to take into our curriculum implementation. After that, Erlanios, our curriculum designer, will walk us through the curriculum and resources provided, and we'll wrap up with a little bit of a Q&A. All right, so to kind of start us off, I'd love to show us kind of a brief introduction video that we have surrounding this curriculum and this project.
Welcome to Social Forest, Oaks of Tovaangar. The city of Los Angeles wasn't always the city we see today. Before the highways, airports, and buildings, this was a thriving and vibrant natural landscape, filled with seasonal pools and wetlands, forests of trees and chaparral, rivers, creeks, and natural springs. Its name was Tovaangar, home to the Tongva people, its first inhabitants for thousands of years. Before colonizers arrived and forced the Tongva to separate from their culture, language, and way of life, they lived as overseers and curators of this land, recognizing the natural relatives, the plants, water, land, animals, and all the natural beings. Social Forest is a reforestation project that brings indigenous perspectives to the forefront and recenters Tongva cultural values of recognition, respect, and responsibility. The planting of native oak trees in the Los Angeles basin represents a push towards cultural and ecological reconciliation through social action and education, and an emphasis on the thrivance of today's Tongva communities.
All Awesome. Now that we've kind of gone through that introduction video, I want to give us some background as to kind of how this project came to be. So our reforestation action was created for the Getty Pacific Standard Time project, Art and Science Collide. In conjunction with our project, as Jerry mentioned, we're also opening a collection exhibition on November 16th that kind of spans the career of the artist behind our inspiration, titled Joseph Beuys in Defense of Nature. Joseph Beuys was an artist, an activist who grew up in Germany in Nazi youth and was part of the Luftwaffe in World War II. He was wounded several times and detained during the war, and his experiences during the war really led him to a profound transformation in about face that really fueled his subsequent career and his commitment to social justice and environmental advocacy. Beuys wanted to explore the spirit of reconciliation in his work, specifically with Germany's actions during World War II and the communities affected by this aggression. And he achieved this with his project, 7,000 Oaks in Kassel, Germany, which was a city that was heavily bombed in World War II. He invited the community to plant 7,000 oaks alongside stone markers as a way to kind of reckon with the traumas of World War II and foster reconciliation. So kind of taking the inspiration from 7,000 Oaks, we've adapted this concept for Los Angeles, really focusing on our city's relationship with the natural landscape and with the Tongva community. So in partnership with Northeast Trees, a local environmental organization based around urban reforestation, and our Tongva collaborators, Desiree and Lazaro, we're planting 100 native oak trees, primarily coast live oak, in Elysian Park and 5 in Caravagna Springs, significant locations for the Tongva community. And we're planting these alongside local sandstone markers. At Caravagna, we're also including a stone mortar for grinding acorns. So this project kind of centers on environmental repair while confronting historical traumas from colonization and white supremacy to work towards reconciliation. So our curriculum really integrates Indigenous perspectives into environmental education and highlights the impact of collaborative art for driving social action. Additionally, we're hosting free school programs here at the museum titled Art and Activism for 7th through 12th graders, connecting themes from the curriculum to art galleries. So students will create their own social sculptures and engage in conversations about the intersection of art, science, culture in LA, as well as the Tongva view of the world as one interconnected system. Title I schools within 15 miles of the museum also receive bus scholarships on a first-come, first-served basis to help with transportation, but more details can be found on the Broads School Visits webpage. Now, I'm excited to introduce our Tongva partners, Lazaro Risu Jr. and Desiree Martinez. Lazaro is a Gabrielino Tongva artist, educator, and musician dedicated to preserving the culture of the First Peoples of Los Angeles. After Lazaro's presentation, we'll hear from Desiree Martinez, a Gabrielino Tongva archaeologist, the Tribal Relations and NAGPRA/Cal NAGPRA Director at Cal Poly Pomona, and co-director of the Pimu Catalina Island Archaeological Project. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lazaro.
Thank you, Damaris. So happy to be here, everybody. Thank you for taking this time to look at all of this great curriculum that we've worked on. And I want to start by introducing this basic concept and practice we call in the language mahach. And the X sounds kind of like an H, but it's a very distinct sound that's in the language. So the X is nothing like what it sounds like in English. The sound of the word would be mahach, and it means to give, to exchange, or to swap. And in this case, this perception, this practice comes in the form of reciprocity. In English, we would call this giving back or reciprocity. And so I thought it would be very helpful to illustrate that the tree you're seeing here is a tree that's more than 100 years old. It's an oak tree that's at the California Botanical Gardens. And it illustrates a very old tree that probably was here much before all of us. And these trees would have been numerous all across Los Angeles, all across Orange County in times past. And unfortunately, because of a lack of reciprocity and just a lot of building and human importance, these trees are not in existence too much, at least not that old. And it's mostly because mahak is missing as a core value in our education system. So that's why I thought we would introduce it here. We're gonna make sure and illustrate that. So let's go ahead and move on to our next slide, if we could. A practice of reciprocity, mahak, is embedded in the culture. And so when we're taught when we're little is that things have to be handled with a lot of respect, and we have respect for all life. There's a recognition of nature as a relative, and our perception is that humans are a part of nature. We're not separate from nature. And the reason we call nature a relative is because we relate. We find ways to relate. Most of these are through ancestral knowledge and practice, such as you would see in the picture here. Tending the land, growing plants, using plants for all our basic needs before there were stores, before the city grew, the indigenous people, our ancestors, had to make everything for themselves. And so their connection with nature was a lot stronger. They had to observe nature over a long period of time. And also, they were beneficiaries of a culture that was passed down from generation to generation. And so, that knowledge of the land, that knowledge of the plants and animals, and how to live in harmony with them was an accumulated knowledge over the generations. And of course, colonialism interrupted that process of transmitting the culture across the generations. And so we're in the process now of recovering that and teaching it. And so recognition of nature as a relative is a really important concept to share because our perception today is that we are separate. For example, people might talk about the environmental crisis as if it's something that's separate outside, right? Outside and not a part of us, when in fact it's because of us. So that's something to think about. Reciprocity to nature for giving us all the things we need to live is crucial. It's important because we need so many things from nature. It's only logical that we would have to give back. Reconciliation of current humans with nature in Tovaangar, which we call this place, we call it Tovaangar, which means the place, something like the place on top of the rock. In other words, the world. And there's voluntary approaches to environmental reparation that start small and mostly through learning. So part of our approach is that we would like to teach and enculturate a new generation of people that can think about this very critically, their relationship to the environment, how their behavior, their consumerism affects the environment, and so on. So there's a lot of different material we can interrogate there. And this reparation is tied and very closely to this concept, this practice of reconciliation as well, because the reconciliation we're talking about is not only human to human, it's human to nature, human to animal and plant. And so reflecting on some of the literature of Joseph Bowie's made us think about this, how the reconciliation after the war was human, but obviously humans have an effect on the land, and so those scars on the land usually last several generations. Sometimes they're harder to see later, but they're still there. And so, again, that reconciliation and reparation kind of run parallel. So this practice of tending the land is not simply a practice in learning about the science of plants, but it's a practice in becoming a human who can relate to nature with a different etiquette. And so we want to do that through learning. That's why it's important that this cultural content, this core value of reciprocity, mahak, is in here. It's woven into this curriculum, and our hope is that it will have a ripple effect and possibly make its way through the generations as a basic tool for understanding ourselves in the world. And a good example of that would be learning about native plants, because it takes a lot of years to learn about native plants. And so if somebody starts when they're young, they still have a lot of years to kind of, turn things around because when it starts, just sharing from personal experience, it starts small. But it kind of sticks to you, it's interesting and it's a lot of outdoors and so that's a good example is just learning about native plants and possibly planting some in the future, just like we're modeling that. And it's a way of giving back because of what our impact has been on this land. And just to expound that, very few people understand what LA would look like without humans if nature were healthier or if the indigenous people were here only. And it's these kind of imported concepts and practices that have done um, what they've done to the land. Basically, what the effect is that nature's not visible too well in Los Angeles because we built over it so avidly. So let's move on to the next slide. Humans relating to nature through plant knowledge and activities is a type of social sculpture because when we get together, we usually have these embedded lessons. We have these talks, but the talks are put into action through this practice of possibly planting, germinating, tending. These might be new concepts, but they're very useful because every student has something that they'll attach to, something that interests them. So my hope is that something within this scope of relating to nature, whether it be being out there in nature, reading, planting stuff, going to nurseries, that sort of thing, native plant nurseries, could be the start for some of these kids on that journey, and it becomes in the future a type of social sculpture because it's a type of activity, right? That's more than just planning. There's a conscious effort behind it, and so that makes it social sculpture. If we can move on, that would be nice. I think we have one more, and this core value, mahach, comes from our ancestral wisdom. It's a gift. So even what we're doing as teachers, we consider that a gift. That's mahach too, because all of our teachers know we make a lot of sacrifices, right? So it's important, I think, to put that within a good scope of understanding that we're gifting the future generations this wisdom in hopes that they're able to make good decisions. And that's it.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Lázaro, for your presentation. Now I want to pass it over to Desiree Martinez. Desiree, I believe you're muted.
I then wanted to continue on with what Lázaro was talking about in terms of Maha and the idea of reciprocity. And it really comes from this idea of the 3 R's that we're taught in terms of that recognition, respect, and responsibility. And because of those really core principles within the Gabrielino Tongva culture, we have a lot of community members that are relearning, reconnecting, and reestablishing those relationships, not only amongst tribal members, but also with the land. And that's one of the core goals that we have, not with this social sculpture that we're creating, is not only to serve as a way to provide the indigenous perspective of the land to the general public, but also to allow our community to continue to thrive. And I'm really, and I want to be talking about this idea of thrivance, because it really is a different way of thinking about and talking about indigenous communities. So can you go to the next slide, please? So a lot of you may, if you've done any research or read any Native American studies, you'll hear this idea of survivance. And it is a term that was coined by Gerald Visner, who does Native American literature, and he really talks about wanting to highlight that a lot of the Native American communities, even with the onslaught of colonialism, genocide, and cultural side that they have survived into the present, that these communities are vibrant and continuing on. And you can see the quote here that he has in one of his writings of really focusing on that survival. I have here on the left-hand side this picture of a cat because in discussing with Greg Castro, who happens to be a tribal member here in California, who's Ohlone, when he was talking about his own people, when he thinks about survivance and thinks about survival or how Native American communities in California are talked about, he thinks about this cat, that that we as a community are barely hanging on, we're barely surviving in the modern world. We're just trying to grab on to anything. And he really changes and wants to change that perspective and thinking about thrivance. Can you go to the next slide? That yes, our communities have survived, but we are in fact thriving, and that is something that should be celebrated and thought about, that our communities are not in the past, they are in the present, and they will be continuing on into the future. And again, one of the things that has been lacking, particularly for the Gabrielino Tongva community, is that we're not federally recognized. And what that means is that we do not have a permanent space that we can call our own. And so when we want to participate in our cultural activities, whether it's doing cultural performances or dances or social gatherings or harvesting or taking care of our native plants to be used for basketry, to be used for traditional foods, etc., we have no space to do that. And if we need to do any of those types of activities, we have to ask for permission from various entities, whether it's going to the National Forest, going to someplace like UCLA or the Robert Redford out of Pitzer College, creating memorandums of understanding with these institutions to create places where we can do these activities. It really makes it hard for our community to be able to do that and be able to have access to the plants and the items that we need to in order for us to continue to thrive. So one of the biggest things that we wanted to do, particularly with this social sculpture, is because acorns play such a very important part in our communities as a traditional food, also as a traditional food for our other relatives, which are the animals that use the acorns and the other items that are shed from the tree, that it becomes important for us to create that space for our communities in the future to be able to harvest and go to those places such as Elysian Park. And in a little bit, I'll talk about Curravugna, to go and be able to gather without having to ask permission, to be able to go and process the food stuff with our community so that we can continue on and passing down that traditional knowledge to the future generations. Next slide. And I should have mentioned a lot of those pictures are pictures of our community members in the previous slides. And so there is a lot of places that and ways that you can go to learn more about our community in general. And one of the biggest things that's really important, which I'll stress in the next slide in terms of things to think about, is making sure that the things that you also include, we've developed the resources here with members of the community in conversation with a lot of other curricula and interpretive materials we created for a number of different institutions, for instance, Rancho Los Alamitos and other, the Autry. And we brought all of that together in order to create what we have for Social Forest. But again, there are other places that you can also visit that really will enforce those perspectives and histories, including Curravugna Springs, which is one of our sacred sites and springs that is located on the campus of University High School in Los Angeles. It's open the first Saturday of every month, where the public is welcomed into the space in order to partake of the environment, but also to help maintain the lands, raking leaves, planting plants, harvesting as well, so that you can work side by side with community members that are there and to learn more about our connection to the lands. I have 3 books that some were written, well, all of them were written by our community members and really tell a different story about our communities. And then the Mapping Indigenous LA website provides a lot of information about the various places across Los Angeles that are very important to our community. And again, these are places that are sacred to us, are important to us, and are available in order to learn more about our community. Next slide. So how can you support the thrivance of the Gabrielino Tongva community and in general Native communities across the United States? And it's what's really important, particularly in 2021, Governor Newsom created the Truth and Healing Committee in order to really think about and identify the harms that have been created or have been done to the indigenous communities in the state of California. And one of those biggest goals is to honor the truth and the history. And when you're honoring the truth and the history is you're telling the truth, whether it's painful, whether it's embarrassing, it still needs to occur. And a lot of the educational material that's out there regarding the Gabrielino Tongva, even though they might be written by scholars, anthropologists, big names from institutions across the United States, doesn't mean that it's the truth. In some instances, those studies were done without the informed consent of the community. It twists the history and doesn't talk about how the Gabrielino Tongva see themselves in relation to the environment, see themselves in relation to everybody around them. So when you're looking to talk about the Gabrielino Tongva, and one of the things that the Bro did from the very beginning in reaching out to work with community members is to make sure that that perspective is highlighted, forefronted, in providing accurate information about the community to be discussed and taught about. So when you're looking at materials, you want to identify, review, critique, and demand that history is told by tribal members. So if you see something out there that isn't doing that, one of the ways that you can be a good conspirator as opposed to an ally, which I have a little further down, is to, go forth and question what you're seeing if it doesn't have any participation in by Tongva tribal members. And there is this phrase, nothing about us without us. It was first coined in the disability movement, but it's something that a lot of Native American community members, particularly here in California, has been using as a tagline when they're discussing with institutions about their lack of participation of Indigenous people with their interpretative and educational materials. The other thing in order for you to do to support thrivance is to discuss California genocide and culturalcide, using those terms. And a lot of the histories that are out there really gloss over the detrimental activities that were done to the communities here in California. There were people that went out and literally that was their job, to go and kill Native American people so they could get the land. There were children that were taken forcibly from their homes and put into boarding schools in order to strip their culture from them so that they could be assimilated into the dominant culture and become civilized. These are things that are not inaccurate. They are the truth, but a lot of times they are not given the light of day because of embarrassment, because that history, is a really terrible thing and it is traumatic. But it's really important to recognize that and to respect not necessarily the activities that happen, but to respect the people and the ancestors that survived that horrible history. I myself wouldn't be here unless my ancestors survived that slaughter that occurred during the Spanish, the Mexican, and the American periods. And it's also important for you to teach that important history. And then talking about uh, again the resiliency of the Tongva through time in the present and show that we are continuing to thrive. And then lastly, don't be an ally or a champion of Tongva causes, be an accomplice. And this is something that was discussed, and I have the website there if you want to learn more about the details. Is, these ideas of being an ally or champion, it's as if you are the white savior. You are, in some instances, a lot of people that are consider themselves allies are actually co-opting the position of Native communities for their own, in some instances, secret agendas. And so, what we really need as a community in order to find space for us to continue our cultural practices, find ways in which we can reconnect with the land and to live out those laws and teachings that our elders and our creator gave to us, is for you to be an accomplice with us, to be at the ground floor collaborating with us to find ways in which we can be even more vibrant and continue on into the future. And so that's the end of my slides. Aweshkana. Hey, Aweshka Hinea. I can never pronounce it correctly.
Great. Thank you so much, Desiree. That was a lovely presentation. And now to kind of carry us into the curriculum walkthrough, I want to introduce Erin Lanius, who was the curriculum's designer and creator.
Hi, everyone. So I just want to really quickly go through how all of this knowledge and these concepts and themes have been synthesized by the Broad into a collection of resources and a collection of resources for us as educators to how to construct an engaging and dynamic learning experience for students, right? This is pretty complex concepts. And so how do we make it approachable to young people, and how do we make it engaging and relevant to where they're at as students? So the first part of this is integration into Schoology. We understand that most teachers are familiar with this platform. And so if teachers and students are kind of speaking this language, the ability to integrate this into the sites that we are all using is kind of the first step of making this approachable and making it usable, again, by teachers and students. And so embedded into Schoology activities are sets of Google Slides. And this is kind of the first resource that we can use to start to construct this learning experience in our classrooms. And these slides vary between the way in which we kind of engage with them. There are some elements of direct instruction, some elements of co-exploration, introductions for conversation to be had with students, and then some prompts for creation. And approaching this type of curriculum, it is not as if we as the teachers are experts. And so that's why I use that term kind of co-exploration. Approaching this with students is, we are exploring this together, and let's kind of find the answers as we look. Is a good way to approach it, as opposed to, a long block of direct instruction in that, we take the role of the expert and kind of just impose knowledge upon the students, right? So each of these activities will take between 30 and 50 minutes to engage with, depending on the size of the class and the duration of discussions and the amount of engagement you receive. And if we move to the next slide, each of these activities, there's really broken down into these three categories: the topics of people, the topic of art, the topic of science, and then the topic of the place. And each one has a corresponding activity sheet. And this activity sheet can be engaged with in a variety of ways. First, it is a printable PDF. So if the way in which you work in your classroom is very physical, and you know you're going to get the greatest amount of engagement from your students if they have a physical sheet of paper in front of them, kind of writing things down, drawing things, diagramming out Venn diagrams and comparisons. It can be used in that way. These images are also integrated into the sets of slides, and these sets of slides are formatted as Google Notebooks. So if your students are accustomed to working digitally and engaging with material via a Chromebook or a laptop, these can be filled out, interacted with through the computer. So kind of two different ways in which the content can be engaged with. And this curriculum has a lot of different angles in which it has been constructed. We're looking at geography, we're looking at the natural sciences, we're looking at culture, we're looking at art. And so in constructing this, we really tried to align this with both subject areas and the next generation science standards. And so along with the learning resources, we have links to subject area alignment documents. And kind of you as a teacher trying to figure out, well, where does this fit within my curriculum? Where is this going to make sense with the overarching themes that I'm teaching in my classroom? This document can be beneficial. And similarly, we have a document that outlines its links to the NGSS topics, specifically looking at Earth systems, Earth and human activity, and ecosystems, specific to the Los Angeles region. In addition to the resources that are embedded within Schoology, there's also a kind of native collection of this on the Broad's website. So socialforest.thebroad.org has this in an interactive kind of navigate grid. And it's really a place for that co-exploration, the ability of students to go through this and find specific themes and follow the narrative through these topics. This website also has a pretty cool embedded audio translation of a lot of terms that you can listen to. So a set of headphones with their Chromebooks and their ability to kind of hear these words is a value in this. Also in the website are external hyperlinks to kind of many of the things we just heard about. So the possibility of accessing what are the next steps. And so if you go to the next slide, this also lives within the resources in Schoology. So at the end of each slideshow, there's a call to action slide with a set of hyperlinks and some opportunities of if you want to explore further, maybe this leads to a plan to visit the Broad Museum, or maybe this leads to a way in which you can engage with some activism or a local organization. So that's roughly the curriculum. Within the first set of slides, there's also a very detailed video walkthrough of each of the topics and the way in which that activity will play out. So I recommend as a first starting point, going to that video and watching that. It's about 4 minutes long. Yeah, it's been a great opportunity to collaborate on this project. And I think we can now open this up to questions if you have any. And we're happy to answer anything you've got.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. So now we're moving into our Q&A portion. So if you have any questions, feel free to do the raise hand feature or pop them into the chat. We're happy to answer them.
The curriculum that you were showing, do I find that on the Schoology group that I just joined?
Yeah, actually, Damaris, if you don't mind stopping the screen share, then I can show everybody where it is. So I'll show everybody where this lives. So if you go in Schoology, yeah, okay, perfect. So if you go into your Schoology and then you go to the group, and you go to the LAUSD Climate Literacy Schoology group, what you'll see is under resources, you can click on that, and you can see here We have climate literacy classroom learning resources. And right here at the top, we have the Road Museum Social Forest curriculum, all housed here. So once you click in this, you can see the main website. You can see the flyer with a little bit more information, and then each of the lessons are linked directly here. And I believe you can just click on it. You should be able to see it immediately, the presentation, along with all the videos that are embedded here. They're beautiful videos, by the way. So that's kind of how you can get access to all the curriculum. So you don't have to worry about the sign-ins or anything like that. I will say take a look at the website because again they have a lot of other additional resources in general to the pro. Yeah, Aaron, do you want to speak about kind of like maybe the grade level that
Yeah,
it's kind of designed for, but then also hopefully can be modified by teachers to adapt it to all grade levels?
yeah, definitely. So that was one of the challenges that we approached kind of developing this is which grade levels are we designing for and how many students we can reach. I would say that some of the content is fairly complex and mature. It's designed to challenge a high school student. And so approaching this as a junior high or middle school teacher, I would recommend reviewing it first and really being critical of, where are the moments in which my students are going to be challenged by the complexities of either the activity or the concepts being introduced. So it isn't in kind of segregated grade levels, but instead I would say the content that lives on Schoology is designed to be more approachable, whereas the Broads website really has a lot more kind of detail and kind of it is just a fuller, more complex set of knowledge. So I would say start with what is on the Schoology site. If you and your classroom want to dig deeper, then integrate the Broads website. Especially looking at elementary, I would really look at the activities and the way in which you can engage with the activities versus aiming it more towards direct instruction in which you're kind of sharing the knowledge with the students. I think the hands-on work, the worksheets are going to be far more engaging. There's some instances in which the students are drawing, kind of doing, biological sketches of the oak tree through its life. I think that would be a great activity for the younger students. Whereas some activities are like comparing the Western perspective of nature versus the Tongva perspective of nature, which might be a fairly complex concept for younger students to approach.